Salutations, everyone! Welcome back to another Total Warhammer 3 guide for Immortal Empires, still in its beta at this point. So, obviously, some things are subject to changes. So, today we'll be covering the Dwarves. We'll be going in a order. We'll be talking about the faction and how they play. Then we'll hit upon the economy, technology, what to research, and finally, the various lords, starting locations, and starting strategies. Okay, first things first, the dwarves. The dwarves have a couple unique mechanics to them. The first obvious one is the Book of Grudges, which appears over here on this button. You will see all the various things that have been done to the dwarves over periods of time that the dwarves are still very resentful of. These kind of set your mini objectives because you do not want to let a grudge go on for too long. If you leave it alone, it will gradually increase. And there is a bar up here. And if the dwarves are happy with you, you get bonuses to construction, research, other dwarves, and stuff. As they get less happy with you, you start getting penalties towards other dwarves, research, control rate. Plus side is your units charge better, and you have a chance of getting slayers. Slayers that appear here appear under your Regiments of Renown tab, by the way. You can recruit them instantly. They replenish over time, and it tells you the percentage that you're likely to get them. Giant Slayers are better at killing large. Slayers are good against unarmored enemies. Anyway. So, the other couple mechanics the dwarves have to play with is, and this is an important one, so I'm just going to quick run this battle here, is their after battle effects are different than other factions. Some have, integrate, subjugate, kill, ransom. The dwarves have two. The dwarves have Drink to Victory, which for 2 turns will apply to the province the army's in, gives you increased income, gives you plus 20 growth and 5 control. This is very important for the dwarves because they are a very defensive, slow building civilization that's very powerful on the defense, but that does not have a lot of growth. So plus 20 growth for 2 turns is really useful. This allows you to play more defensively and build up your settlements to be absolutely monstrous defensive citadels rather than being offensive as much. And the other one is they can loot it, but when they loot, they get Oath Gold. So, and now if we go over here, we'll see that this growth has gone up. Oath Gold is the next thing, and that comes as part of the Forge. Now, this Forge is different for one of the Legendary Lords, and we'll talk about it when we get to them. But for now, let's go over what the Forge is. The Forge uses Oath Gold to forge things. It's pretty simple. However, it also uses resources to forge better ones. For example, this one gives 6 melee defense. Down here, this one, using Obsidian and Oath Gold, gives you 6 melee defense, but also weapon strength. As you go further down, you start getting into some pretty powerful stuff. So, in order to get the resources, you need to occupy settlements that have them, or I believe you can trade with other factions that have them. In my experience, you're best off trying to own the settlements yourself, because it's more reliable. The Forge is honestly a middle towards late game thing you're going to do when you have Oath Gold being generated at a reasonable rate through specific buildings, and you've expanded to the point you have access to a lot of resources. Now, there is, and I'll just mention this here, there is a building that gets you Oath Gold, and that is your Armory, generates Oath Gold per turn, your Smithy here. You also get Oath Gold from the Trading Depot over here as well, although it's less. And every single Lord of the Dwarves, I think Grombrindal might be the only exception. Actually, this guy's an exception too. Most normal Dwarf Lords, so let's just quick recruit one, have an Oath of Forging or various other top of their skill tree here, and it basically boosts Oath Gold generation. Since you're mainly using Oath Gold for forging, and you don't need a lot of it early on, but it's definitely a resource you want to start to accumulate towards the mid and late game. If you complete grudges, which of course you should do, you also get Oath Gold from them. Now, in the forge, you can forge a variety of things. You could forge weapons, you can form armor, talismans. I particularly recommend early on, if you've got spare oath gold, which you should generate some, a Slayer's Ring, a 5% ward save on your lords, just is a really nice little thing you can get early on and spend your oath gold on. Uh, These are half decent as well, but I would suggest you probably get the ward save over these other ones. Also get enchanted items. Physical resistance is really good. Um, Physical resistance plus ward save. It's going to be hard for you guys to die in melee. The next thing is runes and banner runes. So these runes can be equipped to certain characters. Also, there's a recycle option here. So if we were to go in on this guy, it would appear as an ancillary. You can equip 3 character runes here, and you can have other ancillaries below. Just be aware that you can only equip 3 character runes on each character. So once you use it on one character, it's on that character until you take it off. You just can't get one rune and apply it to all your lords. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about how one plays the dwarves. So the dwarves are definitely, I would say, probably the most defensive faction in the game, race/faction. Uh, they have actually pretty decent garrisons, and once they get and build a garrison building, their settlements, a level 4 with a runic gate walls thing, is very hard to take. Um, it's extraordinarily painful. You can do it, but the AI struggles immensely with it, and other players, they would need 2 armies probably to take your settlement, unless they customize specifically for dwarves. The reason is the dwarf base infantry. Now, it's not really base infantry, is it? Well, I'll talk about that. So you can, in any settlement here, your base stuff, you will be able to train miners. Miners are the base dwarf unit. Miners are not a bad unit. They're half decent. They do pretty good if you're going to bash the way through a gate to get into a settlement or something. They're pretty good at it. And they're armor piercing, which is pretty unusual for a base unit. But as soon as you build the level 1 Dwarven Barracks, you get access to Dwarf Warriors. You also get miners with blasting charges, which is kind of cool. You get to kind of throw grenades. But Dwarf Warriors are a very solid unit. For example, here's one. It's got 40 melee defense, 22 melee attack. It's a cut above your average kind of tier 1, tier 2 infantry. It's really solid. And later on, you will get Longbeards. As you can see, are a significant boost from Dwarf Warriors. And then later on, you can even get stuff like Hammerers, which are even stronger. All dwarf units have a level of pretty decent armor, which means unless you're fighting nations that have armor piercing, your units are going to last and fight way longer than would be expected. They're very hard to injure. All of them have, even the miners have half decent melee defense and attack. A line of dwarf warriors will hold out. In fact, they're more likely to die standing because of their high leadership than actually run away. If they do, they tend to rally pretty quickly, but they tend to lose a lot of people, and they're expensive to maintain. So early on, what you're going to want to do is get to a level 2 Dwarven Barracks, which unlocks Quarrelers, and Quarrelers with great weapons. The reason of this is the Dwarf Quarrel unit has been, in all the Total Warhammer games, probably one of my favorite units. Not because it's super overpowered or anything, it's because it does its job, and it does it well. It is a basic range unit that kills things. It's armored and shielded, meaning it can take on most other archers well, and it is half decent at fighting in melee. If you were to look at the stats of one of those and compare it, it's better than a miner, and it's on par with the Dwarf Warrior. They just feel good to use. And so what you a lot of the times will want to do is place your units in like a square formation with your quarrelers in it. Good old pike and shot formation, except dwarves don't get pikes. And pretty much hold let the enemy come to you while you shoot them from range. The dwarves also have access to, actually let's finish this. The higher levels, Longbeards are an improvement to dwarf warriors. they're a good improvement. They're not. I will not say that I feel that the increased maintenance cost really is needed. Like, you probably will not need them in the army as much as you think you will. Having a couple of them is important though, because they have what they call old grumblers. Let's see, find that. Basically, they encourage their allies around them to make it harder for them to rout. So a handful of them will strengthen your dwarf warriors even more. The dwarves also have access to a very interesting line of range units. In fact, the dwarves get catapults and ballista, bolt throwers and grudge throwers pretty early on. I have not found great success in any of the games using bolt throwers. Some people might have. I find the grudge throwers to be better. They count as an anti-siege unit, both of them, which means the dwarves get access to siege that can just so you can immediately attack capital settlements much earlier than other factions. And they're good. Your average grub thrower will probably rack up a couple hundred kills in a battle, regardless of the enemy. They hit hard, they have decent range, and they're relatively cheap. Once you get to the higher levels, though, you get cannons, which are really nice as well. I find grudge throwers to be a little bit more useful than cannons because of their firing arc, but give both a try, use what you like. Now we get into the interesting stuff. Dwarves get gunners, just like the Empire does. Basically, they get handguns. And a dwarven handgun thunderer unit will obliterate an enemy regiment if they get long enough. Now, using them is difficult because they have a lower end of range. They're not low range, but they're kind of mid to low ranged unit. And the enemy will target them. So usually one of the best formations is dwarf warriors with a staggered front with thunderers behind shooting, or you flank with the thunderers and fire into enemies from the side or the back. They're also decent at melee. I find they tend to die a lot faster than the quarrelers in combat, but that's just me. The dwarves also have access to flamethrowers. You want a flamethrower in your army. Flamethrowers absolutely roast their way through melee infantry units. And since the dwarves are a melee faction, basically, with decent range, if you're fighting greenskins, Skaven, vampires, this is your go-to unit. The flames are amazing against the units. They hit hard. They've got good ammunition. They've got low range, but as long as you keep them alive, which, considering they have high armor and high leadership, they will do fine at burning their way through enemy ranks. And then finally, they get Troll Hammer torpedo units. They basically have rocket launchers. They're pretty useful if you can pull them off. They don't have tons of ammunition. They don't fire particularly fast, but boy, do they hit hard when they hit. Plus, they're armored. I found, despite them being a new addition and really strong, I found I still liked Iron Drakes a little bit better. But that was my personal opinion. The dwarves also get organ guns, which are kind of like an early machine gun. Very solid unit. Once you get it on the battlefield, just set it up on a high hill and watch it kill things. And finally, come on, if you'll let me select it. Come on, game. You get flame cannons. Again, flame, really strong. This is like the ultimate dwarf artillery unit. It is very strong. It's from a decent range, and it does fire damage. Build it, use it, watch vampires and Skaven burn to death. The dwarves also get access to some additional ranger units. I found the rangers, despite being able to flank and stuff, because that's what they do, they can move hidden in any terrain. I found that they're not that great, in my opinion. I'm sure some people will use them to greater effect, but I find if you send them out on their sides, they tend to get attacked by the enemies, and for the same use, you can get a quarreler who basically just stands behind your lines and shoots. They're basically the same in terms of range and range damage. So the only difference is these guys stalk, and they're actually a tiny bit cheaper now. I don't use them that much. Some people do. They also get Bugman's Rangers, which are a little bit more useful. They're an upgraded version that requires a drinking hall. They're half decent. That's about all I can tell you. Moving on from that, though, if you build the smithy and you get to level 2, you can get Hammer's units. The Hammer unit is probably one of the finest units in the game. These guys will absolutely destroy in melee infantry combat unless the enemy has high armor piercing. I've never really seen them kill regiments on their own, but they will hold out forever and do a lot of damage before they go down. I don't know why they never survive, but I've never seen them really win battles for me. They do really well in auto resolve if you do auto resolves. And you get your slayers, which are kind of like insane dwarven zealots who just kind of want to die, but before they die, they want to do a lot of damage. Slayers, pretty solid unit. They have bonuses fighting large, which is interesting, and they do some half decent armor piercing. They don't run, so once you put them on the battlefield, they will just stay on the battlefield until they die. So you have to keep an eye on them because they will just die where they stand. And if you want to keep them alive, you need to micromanage them in battles, pull them back. They're really strong, though. Surprisingly, they can deflect missiles, which is kind of hilarious to some degree. They're not particularly great at it, but they can. And then the upgraded version is the Giant Slayers. Again, you can get Slayers and Giant Stage Slayers from your Regiments of Renowned, so you're probably not going to need to build too many of the Slayer cult buildings to get them. The only reason you build it is really for the corruption. And then the final thing the Dwarves get are gyrocopters. The Dwarves get helicopters. They're very good against factions that don't have ranged units. I find if you're fighting a faction that has, not ranged units, flying units, they're not as great against ranged units. But if you're fighting a faction that has flying units, they tend to lose in melee flying combat to most anything. Dragons in particular are their worst enemy. Otherwise, they prove to be very useful against enemies. Just don't let them get shot at for ages by ranged units. Pretty good against Skaven and Greenskins who don't have flying units. Further on, you can get gyro bombers, which do more damage. They drop bombs. It's pretty powerful if you look at that missile strength. So that is the basic dwarf units. So just to reiterate the dwarven strategy, you want to try and get your settlements, specifically your capital ones, to level 2. Put it in a gate, at which point you can kind of just sit back and they will be almost untakeable to the average AI. Be aware that you are going to need to build a hostelry, basically a drinking hall, in every one of your major settlements. The dwarves have public order problems. They're kind of odd in that sense. Even their technology still leaves them with public order problems at times. Just build one of these, you get a trade resource out of it, and if you want to build Bugman's Rangers, it helps as well. I just build it, one of these, a wall, and they have a really good industry building. And you're pretty much set in capital settlements. For minor settlements, what you want to do is, actually, let's just take this settlement. I don't really care about this. Best thing. So the Dwarven minor settlements, obviously you're locked off from the really, really cool stuff. I will point out the fact you can get barracks to level 3 and the ranger barracks at level 3, which means you don't necessarily need to place them in your major settlements unless you're afraid of losing the minor settlements. Now, because the dwarves grow and expand so slowly, you don't really want to lose settlements if you can help it, and dwarven garrisons are amazing at holding out. So what you really want to do is focus on developing a region to the point that every settlement has a garrison building in it, then start expanding outwards and kind of just rinse and repeat. Build up your settlements. The dwarves do very well with concentrated industry, and they're very defensive. So minor settlements, by and large, you want to try and stick a growth building. They have barley farms, stick an industry, a trinket maker, and stick a garrison in it. And you can always replace the farm later on with a barracks. Okay, let's talk economy. So the Dwarven economy is very strong, but their units are very expensive. Their average unit, the Dwarf Warriors, which you're going to be using a lot of early on, are 114 gold in maintenance. Building a basic tool workshop, a trinket maker, your industry gets you 200. So basically for every one of these, you can upkeep a Dwarf Warrior. This is a very good economy building. It's not as great as some of the others. And of course, all numbers are subject to change, but this is a good industry right now because it pays for itself in 5 turns. You want to build these everywhere, even if you're worried about losing a settlement, so long as you can hold it for 5 or more turns, you'll have made money off of it. They have a... I'm going to mention this, even though it's not an industry building. The dwarves love growth, so building these farms everywhere is very useful, because as the dwarves' economy grows, they make, obviously, more money, but they really do well from having high-level settlement. Another thing the dwarves are really good at is using resources. Gold mines, iron mines, gem mining. This is where the vast wealth of the dwarves come from. Ideally, every dwarven nation should try and get a hold of a gold mine or even a gem mine early on. In fact, some start with gold mines. In this case, these guys start with a gem mine. They exploit it very well, and they actually trade pretty well. The dwarves are... they're not hated by any of the really good factions. They are hated by all the evil, dark, or chaos factions. So you can usually get a pretty decent trade. Cathay, in particular, for the dwarves on this mountain chain, tends to be a really good trade ally if they don't die. Otherwise, the empires or other dwarves are where you're going to trade to. And the dwarves can boost the money they get by building trading depots, which, as you'll see, increases tradable resources, which more resources you can trade, the more money you get from trade agreements. It also increases the income from trading, and it also boosts income from buildings you have in a settlement. Build it in your capital settlements, build them tall, get your small settlements with a tool workshop, you're going to make lots of money. Outside of that, the engineer's workshop is worth mentioning here, because even though it's not pure industry, it does give research rate, and that we will go into that further on, but it is useful. And building the dwarven armory is very useful as well, because it increases your local recruitment capacity. Dwarves have 2 at start, a Compassion Edict, which gets them to 3. But because the dwarves have a pathetically low replenishment rate, having the ability to train more units is very handy, because you can just disband your injured units and make new ones. It's also why building these barley farms to get even a +5 replenishment rate is great on them. Building them is very useful. Another thing to look at is the dwarven leaders blue line here at the bottom. They have this mason one, which decreases upgrades for your capital settlement. It is very viable to get one dwarven lord and a couple heroes with him that boost income, and just move him around between your settlements, building them up. Some of the dwarven lords, I don't think we got one here. Just quick check. Nope. Some of the dwarven lords that you can recruit give bonuses to, like this guy here, a rune lord. He gives a decreased construction cost. You stack that with the mason ability, you're looking at 20, 24, 25% cheaper capital settlements, which will save you a lot of gold. So it's very worthwhile building one of those and maybe a lord, and just scuttling them around between your settlements to try and boost your income. Like this guy, an engineer, boosts income, and it can get pretty useful. I mean, fully up, it's an additional 6 income. It's worth using. Let's talk technology for the dwarves. So the dwarves have, in my opinion, one of the best tech trees. Similar to the vampires and a few other ones, there are no restrictions for getting a technology outside of this one, which costs 10,000 gold. You're going to want it eventually, but it's a late game tech. So basically, you can do 3 different trees. You can do a range tree down here. You can do a melee tree right here. You can do a trade, diplomacy, public order, and corruption tree here, and then up top you do your income tree. So this has changed a bit from Total Warhammer 2, in my opinion, the priority, because all the dwarven situations give you grudges at the start that hurt. I find the best thing to do to start is to go for this heavy cornstones, basically millstones, to get a 10% growth, because once you start getting negative grudges here, it's hard to keep growing, building, and being productive. So having the additional growth rate allows you to build up your settlements faster, because you'll have low public order in most of your settlements. And the low public order comes obviously with penalties. that you will need to overcome. I recommend growth, again, because dwarves need the growth. Plus, it gives you additional boost to your toolmakers. You can always divert here to get another 10%. Dwarven treasuries, all of these are pretty decent stuff. This one is great if you're getting attacked a lot. You're having to defend. 10% leadership on defense is nuts. And then again, here, your mines, you can get some crazy bonuses. You can get plus 30 income from gold mines. It's pretty nuts. And similar from other stuff as well. Fully all the way down here, if you're crazy enough to waste, 73 plus turns on this, you get a plus 5 income on all buildings. The dwarf tree is so deep, you're probably only going to get through 1 or 2 a game unless you're trying to do a world conquest. So I recommend growing for this one first, getting additional boosts of income, but more importantly, the growth. Afterwards, this depends where you are. If you're around a lot of humans, high elves, and lizardmen, you want to go down here and get the dwarf emissary tree. First off, that's plus 30 relations with humans, high elves, and lizardmen, which is just great. You already get along pretty well with dwarves. It means the humans and others are great trading partners. They're less likely to attack you. You can get alliances. And you're not going to be competing for the same land as them. The dwarven settlements are mostly in mountain ranges that you want to own. As soon as you move out of mountain ranges, you start moving into less favorable terrain. If you're around other factions, you're going to want to trade with them or make defensive alliances, etc. with them. Take dwarven diplomats, dwarven emissaries and diplomats. If you're not, and this is something to do right after the millstoning stuff, if you're not around other settlements, you want to go down this tree. You want to grab these ones right here, specifically all the way to High King's Authority. This will give you relations with dwarves, plus 2 control. This will give you plus 1 more with dwarves. This will give you another control. That's plus 4 control early on, which, as I said, the dwarves have public order problems. This will help. Those 2 trees I've told you, the first one up here, and this one will solve your public order and growth problems, allowing you to not have to worry about just keeping your old stable, really. Plus, it boosts cheaper recruitment cost and also empowers one of your edicts to grow faster. Again, more growth. If you're trading a lot, snag these trade ones. If not, ignore it. If you're using heroes, grab that. I tend to go straight for High King's Authority after that, and then flip over here and go for Valea's Protection. So this gives additional corruption to one of your edicts. This one here just gives you corruption on everything, plus ambush defense, which is nice because you'll fight a lot of Skaven. And then finally, this one gives you plus 3 corruption in all provinces. So all told, you'll have -4 what used to be non-aligned corruption, -4 of corruption in all your provinces. As I said, the dwarves don't have any easy way of clearing corruption. They do have the refractory here, which gives insane public order. So corruption is not as crippling for you as it is for other good factions. But if you're still having problems, you have to build Slayer Shrines to get the corruption reduction. All told, Monument of Grimnir, with that, you'll have -12 to corruption. Pretty much, you can control corruption. It just takes a while to get to this building because it's a level 3 building. So having the tech do 4 for you, which is half of one of those, is really nice. Afterwards, or if you're fighting a lot, you can go down here. And I recommend probably going for the melee tree. This plus 3 is great. Cheaper, higher rank, all this stuff is good. In fact, there's very rarely a bad dwarven technology to research. It's a matter of addressing what needs you have and what you think you'll have. I do recommend going down the melee tree for the dwarves before you go down the range tree, only because if your melee line does not hold, there is no point to having a heavy upgraded range line because you'll die. That's basically it. And the dwarven units that are already strong at range, cannons, thunderers, they don't need a massive boost to kill units. They still will kill units effectively at all parts of the game. This will just make them even stronger. But keeping the melee line alive, I find, is way more beneficial. Plus 2 ranks in Dwarven Warriors, that's a pretty big boost for your starting unit, which you'll probably be training a lot of places. So you'll have a very expensive army. All told, a fully built up Dwarven army can take on 1 to 2 Skaven armies, 2 greenskins. It's, I won't say it's the strongest armies in the game, but it's definitely a top tier army. The only weakness the dwarves have is you have no cavalry at all. You can kind of get some by making alliances with people like Bretonia and stuff, but by and large, expect a lot of defensive battles where you make the enemy come to you, because if they don't, you kill them with artillery or quarrelers. Okay, let's talk starting locations and lords. So the first one we're going to cover here is Karak, Thorgrim the Grudge Bearer, High King of all the dwarves. This is probably the most normal start for the dwarves. It was the original one. It's stayed that way through 3 games now. We start with a very good settlement in Karak. It has a fairly strong garrison, and it has a gem mine that you want to build turn 1, and you want to upgrade it turn 1. You want to take Pillars of Grundy immediately and work your way over to Mount Squighorn, probably delaying 2 turns here unless you manually fight the battle to replenish your army. Once you do that, this is a pretty good starting region. You want to put on an edict that boosts growth and makes it cheaper to build buildings. And you just want to build it up. You want to get Karak having a garrison building pretty much once you level it up. It's worth putting it in with the unique garrison and the garrison building. It is very hard to take the settlement. And the reason is, this area down here is packed with greenskins and stuff. Barak Var is another dwarfen. They tend to die to Wurzag, the Bloody Hands. And then they come for you. So having your capital not fall is great. Outside of that, you want to build up these 2 settlements. But then you face a choice. You can go north, where Skarsnik now lurks, Crooked Moon. I recommend killing him off early, because Mount Gunbad is the richest settlement in the game, pretty much bar none. It has a unique building that gives plus 800 gold income to dwarves, plus it has a gold mine, plus it's a capital settlement. You can make bank from this, and as the dwarves, having more money, it's always a good thing. So I recommend taking out Skarsnik. Your starting army is good. You do not want to lose your Gyro Bomber, your Hammerers, or your Longbeards unit, because it will take you a while to get them back. But outside of that, build lots of Dwarf Warriors, back them up eventually with Quarrelers. If you can get a Grudge Thrower from building a Siege Workshop in Karak, that will be very useful fighting Skaven. The other option, rather than going north, which I recommend, the other option is you go south. Now, if you go south, you're going to be fighting Skaven. You do have a grudge down here to retake Black Crag. You also have a grudge up here to retake this. So, your choice. You can go either way. I find killing Skarsnik is a good thing. He's very aggressive. He's a powerful greenskin lord you don't really want to mess with. And then after that, at your leisure, you can go south and wipe out the Skaven. Because once you subdue this area, everybody will start attacking you. These guys here will probably attack you. There's vampires up here. There's more greenskins. They'll probably all attack you. Mount Gunbad Fortified is a great defensive place. There's another settlement right here, which is the World's Edge Archway. You put a garrison building in it, and it should hold. So then you'll block 2 easy routes into your lands. If you fortify High Place as well, you don't really have to worry about the AI retaking settlements. Then you can progress south, take all the land here, and continue your grudges all the way down, killing off Queek and taking Karak Azgal for your final starting grudge. Now, once you complete a grudge, Ungrim has a unique bonus. He gets extra bonuses. We'll look at the other grudges people start with. They get less of a bonus. As the High King, he gets a random reward after he solves the grudges. We've already kind of mentioned some of that. He also has better relations with the dwarves. His Longbeard and Hammerers unit are cheaper. I already expressed how powerful Hammerers are. And your commandments, your edicts of the regions are even more powerful. He's very good at building up and just having massively powerful armies. His personal stats, he doesn't really have anything unbelievably amazing for skills. You do want, and I will mention this, you want to take Grudge of the Foul as probably your first level up because it will boost your army massively when fighting green-skinned ogres or Skaven, which are going to be your main enemy. And of course, if you fight Chaos, Undead, Mankind, or the Elves, obviously spec into those. 5 attack is crazy strong. Afterwards, he's also got this unique Ancient Bloodline. Honestly, it's a little bit disappointing. It makes him better at ruling a province. But he's a legendary lord, so he should be attacking. His combat stats aren't bad. He gets the standard upgrades. He tends to not die particularly easily, but that's about it. There's nothing that makes him... He's not one of the great fighters of the game, we'll put it that way. He also has this passive ability, High King, which boosts his allies in an area when they're fighting. Plus 8 melee attack is really nice once you start losing, because it's enabled after the hit points are less than 50%. He buffs the dwarfs. Your red line here, taking Axe Lord early on is really a half-decent plan. In fact, going down the blue line as the dwarves are not as needed. Plus 6 attack and defense for his starting units. And any dwarf starting units are really good. I will mention that as the dwarves, since your replenishment is terrible, before you start buffing your lords for fighting, you definitely want to get Inspirational Leader. Plus 6 casualty replenishment rate, you need it. Let's put it that way. A Dwarven Lord without this is bad. So for him, Grudge Against the Foul, probably. And then maybe Inspiring Presence if you want to. I would recommend Route Marcher. Probably Purebeard, because as I said, dwarves have trouble purging corruption. Wallbreaker is okay. It's not amazing. Miner's Instinct. I've never had trouble intercepting people, really. And Mason, you don't want Thorgrim really just sitting around ruling. You want him fighting. So I would ignore Mason on him. So Purebeard, probably throw a point into either Miner's Instinct or Wallbreaker. Iron Will, then definitely put 3 points into Inspirational Leader. And then you've got your choice of where you want to go next. I find if you're going to go into the desert, Reassuring Presence is nice, but otherwise Alert, so that you have a less chance of being ambushed by the Skaven, who can just ambush you when they attack, is very useful. Inquiring Mind is a nice cap to it all. Plus it gives research, which the dwarves desperately need. So for the dwarves, the blue line is really solid to boost. So that is kind of Thorgrim. So let's jump around to another dwarf lord. Okay, here we are with Karak and Ungrim Ironfist, the Slayer King who must fulfill his Slayer oath. Trust me, you'll hear that a lot if you play as him. Anyway, this guy is he's a Slayer. He's suicidal, like most of the other Slayers. However, he is a king, so he can't just kill himself type thing. He has his whole faction. Literally, if you look at Oathbound, is about Slayers. It's cheap to construct Slayer buildings, recruiting them is cheap, and his infantry moves faster. And the reason is, Slayers are fast for a dwarf. They're significantly faster units, will never catch up to a cavalry unit. His personal stats, he is a fighter. He can fight almost anybody in the game and have a good chance against them. He's one of the few characters that going down the yellow line early on is not the worst decision in the world because it makes him stronger. However, there are reasons why you might not want to do that. First things, he gets access to the Death Blow, which is a thing the Slayers get. You can upgrade it so that when he has less than 50 hit points, he gets a huge boost to his weapon damage and piercing, or you can make the choice to, once you're below 20% hit points, have physical resistance. I recommend taking the Determined Death Blow at 50 rather than Extremely Daring. My logic here, and it's borne out in several battles, that anything that can get you your hit points below 20 is probably going to kill you regardless of the physical resistance. Or you will die before it ever comes really heavily into effect. Yes, it's got a huge boost to your stuff. This one, you're more likely to proc fighting average units just taking damage over time. So I recommend you getting that. It will make his weapon strength and his armor piercing stronger. He can fight almost anybody. Once he levels up again, he's got a choice to boost what he's better against fighting: greenskins, vampires, or chaos. I recommend chaos because it's going to be useful in more situations. And chaos tends to be a more long-term threat to the dwarves. Norska is not immensely than greenskins or vampire counts. Further on, he gets a huge boost to replenishment for slayers and him. You definitely want to get this. Honestly, this is probably the tree you go down first on him. Determined, then probably Ruinous Rival, then Doom Seekers. If you want to use slayers all the time, this is the way to do it. Your slayer's charge lets Ungrim come back from dying a lot faster. At level 12, he gets boosts to just general combat. You want to take all of this. It is quite useful. You'll get amazingly strong fighting chaos. His slayers will get even stronger. You want to do it. Other than that, same thing that we talked about with Thorgrim, getting Inspirational Leader is useful. Less of an issue with this guy if you go heavy on the slayers, because you can get 15% casualty replenishment. However, you should not use just slayers as this guy. You need to mix in other characters. Slayers are good for a while, but they do have their weaknesses. Weaknesses from range, they get shredded. They get absolutely wiped out from range. Any units that are just hit harder than them will kill them. And you will need dwarf warriors. You will need core rollers. You'll want everything else I've talked about for the dwarves. So let's talk about his starting location. He starts with Karak, which is the home of the Slayer cult, which reduces corruption immediately and allows the unlocking of Slayers. This is very useful because you are right next to the vampire counts, the major ones, Vlad and Isabella now. They will eventually start spreading new corruption into your land. This will counteract it. Plus, as you upgrade it, you will get higher ranks for Slayer units and even more corruption reduction. Fully upgraded, you can really start causing chaos for the vampire counts by lowering vampiric corruption in their land. It's quite fun. Outside of it, though, you can, and I recommend immediately, throwing down a gate in your capital. Some people might say, oh, we want a growth or we want income. No, the reality is you want a gate. The reason is the vampire counts tend to go to war with you, even though they don't really want your lands. Having the gate there, plus the Slayer cult, means that this is a very hard settlement for vampires to take, and you can forget about it. The settlement will largely be forgotten because, as this guy, all your war is going to come from the east, unless you subdue this whole area and then decide to kill the vampires. I don't recommend it. I recommend going east. So obviously you start at war with some enemies here. You've got several grudges in the area you want to clear before the severity gets worse. Thankfully, you're all about slayers, and there's a very high chance you get slayers as your grudges get worse. So this guy does really well when there's actual grudges for him. Purge. First things first, though, I do recommend you take out this army, take the lair, build more slayers. Don't forget to throw your hero into the army. He does cleanse corruption, which is nice because he's a runesmith. As the runesmith, you will have options of what upgrade pass to go with, armor or weapons. If you're using lots of Slayer, take the armors, because giving armor to Slayer units just makes them significantly better. If you're not using Slayers, which why would you? You're playing the Slayer King. Increase melee and melee and range damage is nice. This guy's also your magic user, so Wrath and Ruin probably first. Pretty cool. Once you've taken Grashnik's Lair, obviously the incentive is to take Fallen King Mountain. I recommend you do it and finish off Grom Peak, which will connect you down here with Zufbar, which hilariously you have a grudge against. I would honestly leave this grudge unless you feel the need to take it back. At some point, Zufbar will likely die to the vampire counts, at which point the grudge will be removed. So if you do want this Master Rune of Cleansing, which boosts you against vampires, you have to fight 3 battles against them. You don't necessarily have to kill them. Why wouldn't you kill them, though, in all honesty, if you're going to fight them? Otherwise, you want to go north. The big prize here is Karak Ungur, which is a gold mine. You want to get the gold mine. It will solve your money problems as the dwarves, because your starting settlement, although it has a unique building, is not wealthy, and this is Dies, which is not amazingly wealthy either. You'll probably get some relations going with Cathay because you'll spot their caravans. Make trade agreements with them. They like you. You can make a good amount of money trading with them. Plus, you'll protect their caravans a bit more. Outside of that, as you progress up, you can get Master Runes of Passage. You can get this one done, another Master Rune as well that boosts your allies in an area. It's great because you can put it on Slayers who will boost other Slayers in the area, and it can really, really get stronger. In the long run, though, it wants you to head up here, get this Master Rune here, stick this on your leader, and he becomes like 100% melee attack. It's a little bit nuts. Let's see. Have I missed anybody else? I think I've missed one, right? No, I think I've got all of them. Yep. So those are all your grudges and your missions early on. I recommend trying to subdue this area. Make sure to garrison both these two provinces with garrison buildings, and then you'll pretty much have stopped anything coming from the west, which is mainly going to be the vampire counts or chaos if they get to that point. I will point out the one weakness this guy can have sometimes is plagues, so it may be worth tossing down a protection underway lookouts in your provinces that border this area, especially if the guy up here, Nurgle guy, wins, because he can cause some trouble for you. But in the short run, don't worry about it. Focus on subduing this area. If you can, get down here. There's a very rich province I talked about with Thorgrim down here that will get you tons of money. A Grashnik's lair. It's worth taking. Subduing your way down here, you'll border other dwarves. Then you can kind of forget about the south once you fortify there. Outside of that, you're probably going to want to either expand north up into the Norska border regions, which is kind of what the game wants you to do. Or you can head east and start subduing the wasteland out here and pushing closer and closer towards Cathay and the ogres. Be aware the ogres don't hate dwarves, but they don't like dwarves. So you'll probably fight a fair amount of them in the long run. There's greenskins out here at first. I find they tend to die. That's pretty much it for the Slayer King. Slayers are good. They're really solid early on. And they're solid late game. The weakness is really ranged or fighting units that just outdamage them. I would not take more than 6 Slayer units in an army, and you pretty much don't want to make them your front line. You want to flank with them. They're really good if they can attack enemies that aren't attacking back to them. They're kind of like glass cannons. They hit hard, but they die reasonably fast if you're not careful. They do have a really unique ability, which is as long as they have over 75 hit points, none of the entities within the unit die, which means they hit hard for the first 25% of their hit points, which is why flanking is really useful on them. Outside of that, they play like the normal dwarves, although with the Slayers, you're a little bit more offensive than defensive compared to the normal dwarves who wait for the enemy to come to you. You might be charging into them. Slayers have a pretty decent charge bonus that you'll boost even higher. On to the next dwarf. Okay, time for one of everybody's favorite dwarves, Grombrindal, the white dwarf. As I click on the wrong person. If you remember from Total Warhammer 1 and Total Warhammer 2, he had the same faction as Thorgrim, starting Karak. He was the better person there. He is still a very powerful, and in my opinion, one of the better dwarf lords still. But he has now migrated all the way over to Nagaroth region. It's an interesting decision, and it's not actually that bad. He doesn't have as good a start as the other dwarves, but his start can be very powerful if you act quickly. So this is going to be a longer description of a lord than some of the others. First off, he's got a unique mechanic, and he has the Living Ancestors, which is a decision he gets every several turns, usually like 10 to 15 turns. He can reduce it. That allows him to either massively boost his combat strength, his army's combat strength, his faction's growth, research, and other stuff, and I'm forgetting the other one. I think it's like boost replenishment or something. Regardless, as great as it is to buff your army, boost your growth rate, or boost him, if you take the him, he gets like plus 20 attack and melee defense, and he becomes probably one of the strongest lords in the game. And it is tempting to take that, I will admit. but you want to take the one that boosts the research percent by 20%, and you pretty much want to stick on that for quite some time. Dwarves have that long tech tree, so getting further into it faster is a huge boost, and you can then change later on based off your situation. But early on, you want the growth rates, and you want the research rate. So Grombrindal starts here on literally the border of the map. He starts with a unique settlement here, Dracula Spire. It's not a capital settlement, and you cannot build the unique building there initially. But I do recommend you start by throwing down a garrison building and upgrading the barracks. Once it levels up, you want to snag that unique building for the income, oath gold, control, research rate, and boosts. It's a great building, let's be fair. You want it, you want to use it. Now, you start at war with the Skaven. The Skaven are located here, 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 and there's another settlement over here that they tend to own as well. You want to wipe them out, and you want to do it pretty quickly. Fight these guys, move on, going. If you're lucky, you'll get a Slayer or two, which will boost you. Otherwise, keep training Dwarf Warriors. When you can get Quarrelers, build Quarrelers. Take this, Elder Spire. Take Altar of Ultimate Darkness. I recommend taking it by turn 4. If you wait much longer, they will reinforce it, which means you have to wait longer. And you want to be aggressive as you can with this guy at the start. After you take Rakdo Gorge, you're going to start approaching Nagarond. Good old Malekith will probably declare war on you. So we're actually going to jump forward in time so I can show you a little bit more about this region. Okay, we're 57 turns into this game. This is a pretty good point to show where we are. Ignore the factions on the map that I control in the territories. It will be different for you. If you remember how I said there was a Skaven faction up here, and they would eventually be down in Temple of Cain. Temple of Cain is probably one of your most strategic settlements you want to get. So once you get it, what it does is it puts you, I can't really show you at the moment, it puts you within striking range of Nagarond. You want to take Nagarond from Malekith as soon as possible. You take it, Malekith becomes almost useless. In fact, he will die to most everyone else around you in a handful of turns. He is still alive in my game, mainly because he ran south. He's not a threat to me at this point. The cool thing about it being in March range, especially using Grombrindal's increased March range, which you want to get, is that Malekith doesn't seem to recognize you can take his settlement, so he tends to leave it. If you have a Grudge Thrower, which I recommend you get, once you get high enough level, it will be unlockable as a Regiment of Renown. Take it. We're 57 turns in. Grombrindal's level 21. You're going to level up really fast with him. Once you get a Grudge Thrower or another siege weapon or something that allows you to just simply attack Nagarond, move in one turn, hopefully before it gets to settlement level 3 or 4. Take the settlement, and once you take the settlement, this becomes your new base. Yes, I have all this land out here, and yes, I am slowly upgrading it. Still haven't got that unique building. It's mainly just a fortification against the south. I've kind of just ignored it. Nagarond becomes the new focus of your abilities. Hag-Gref down here is very important because it's got a landmark that gives you resources. So if you're trading, you'll get a lot of resources. But Nagarond's the prize. You want to take Nagarond and you want to fortify it. Afterwards, everything up here tends to funnel towards Nagarond. Cauldra up here, if you can take it, is worth taking because it unites your Nagarond province and you can pass edicts. The problem is holding it, so I recommend putting an army there and then fortifying it. With that fortified and Nagarond fortified, the north is not a huge threat. Yes, they're there, and yes, they're at war with you, but I found they're so tied up for the first 50, 60, 70 turns, they're not going to be a threat. This is your opportunity to finish off Malekith and subdue this area. I will point out the fact that Taurus, the Iron Bull, is down here. He will probably attack you as well. The annoying part is he makes this whole area chaos corrupted. Thankfully, it's not a huge issue for you because you've kept everything north of it, but it does prevent you from uniting this area. So killing him becomes something of a priority once you've subdued the north and made it stable. Remember that the dwarves can use the underway stance, something I really haven't talked about here. It allows you to pass terrain, but it makes you immune to most attrition. You can use this to jump mountain ranges, so you can jump to here, then you can jump to here. Hopefully, he's out of the way. Take the settlement, burn down the herdstone. Hopefully, if you're really lucky, he migrates further south, or he comes and suicides against you, or he happens to be dead and you kill him by taking a settlement. Once you do that, colonize this area. There is, annoyingly, the Tomb Kings, the exiles of Nehek down here. For some reason, they don't like you, and they tend to declare war on you. They are a joke fighting the dwarves, in all honesty. The dwarves are better than them in almost every way. Ideally, you want them as allies or at least neutral. If not, take what provinces you need from them. I wouldn't go to all the effort of wiping them out. You'll just find new enemies, but getting peace with them and creating a more stable frontier is worth it. After that, you want to push north. Frond is a great prize because it has a gold mine. I'm not urging you to take it early because defending it becomes a bit of a pain. You've got Harganath here, Thorn Hellebrand, who, if you go out to Grond, you have to take her settlement as well, and then you're exposing yourself to the new waves of the Chaos fortresses and Warriors of Chaos to the north before you're ready. I recommend building up a strong defensive line, developing and stabilizing your economy, which is poor for a dwarf. You can barely support one army, let alone two. And then after that, finally push out and just honestly keep pushing. This is all land you can inhabit, except for up here in the Chaos Ways. So just purge it. Destroy these settlements using the underway to get close, wipe them out, remove the settlements, and just keep going. And that is Grombrindal's start. He's very strong, so let's look at his personal stats. First off, he has a different blue line. His blue line is entirely different. I don't know if this is going to rework. The dwarves, if they do, this will probably be something that changes or is adjusted. He starts off first with a boost to trade, which is amazing. He does not get the boost to movement speed everyone else does. Instead, he gets a skill he can level up to boost all the characters in his faction, equivalent to a blue line. And then if you recruit a lord, you give him the blue line, you're looking at plus 25% movement range rather than the 10 to 15 you would normally have. The other thing Grombrindal has, and it is a godsend and makes him my favorite dwarf lord, is he has a faction-wide +6 replenishment. I talked about how the other dwarves needed to get the +6 from their blue lines. Grombrindal just gives that to all the dwarves. His dwarves can also get that green line heal, so you can have +12 on his other lords. This is definitely one of the best dwarf factions. He also has the White Dwarf's Call, which boosts global recruitment capacity. It's not amazing. I just snag it because if you need to recruit high-level dwarf units, having additional recruitment slots rather than having to move an army from your rear lines where you've got buildings to the front lines, this speeds it up. You've also got, you can do decreased recruitment cost. The dwarves units are expensive to maintain, not heavily to recruit. It's up to you. The Ancient Acumen level 3 recruit ranks is amazing. Basically get everything in this blue line. It even lightning strikes if you want to. However, Grombrindal also has a unique personal line. He gets a plus 15% movement range. This is similar to the blue line that was replaced here. And further on, his armies get better at defending. He gets a recovery time. His units have a reduced vigor loss, meaning they tire in combat a lot less. Stacked with obstinacy, you're looking at a plus 65 reduction in vigor loss, meaning your army will fight on for ages. It's amazing on defense. You can boost your engineers. Basically, take this whole line. This one right here is really unique. It lowers your weapon damage on your entire army, but gives you instead a boost to armor-piercing weapons damage, which is just amazing. He also gets reduced time of ancestors, so you can choose which ancestor things you follow. You still want to stay on the research most of it. Outside of that, Grombrindal then has your standard boost line. I would not take his standard boost line for melee combat. I would instead go down his red line. You can simply take a time of the ancestors and boost, get the benefits of this tree without going down it until you have excess points. He does have unique quests, which are worth doing when you can do them. All the heroes and people do. The only thing I will mention is it gives him the fact that he can do magic attacks, which is one thing the dwarves do lack on, and he gets a ward save. He's probably the strongest of the Dwarf Lords. His faction's probably the strongest. He's got a great chance of fighting elves. He gets a good boost against fighting interception on the underway. And his personal stats, the White Dwarf, melee defense for ranged units, quarrelers, making them even better, increase reinforcement, increase leadership. This guy is the warmonger of the dwarves, and it shows. He's the strongest of the dwarven heroes and probably the dwarven lords. And his starting location is not great, but it works. On to the next dwarf. Okay, here we are with Thoric Ironbrow. So, Thoric Ironbrow has, prior to the start of the game, found the lost dwarven homeland of Karak. And he starts with a gold mine, which means obviously you want to keep upgrading it because it's a massive source of wealth. He starts down the southern area of Araby. He starts in arguably, I would say, the worst dwarf location, even worse than Grombrindal's expedition. Mainly because he has no allies and everyone around him hates him and will try and kill him. He also doesn't have a great horde in himself. You start at war with some greenskins. You want to subdue your way up here. Oddly enough, this province here runs all the way up to about here. There is a greenskin settlement here, which you can see this line here. This means it is one of the artifacts that he is trying to recapture. There's a series of them. They're your grudges. You want to recapture them and then reforge them. You'll get different bonuses once you do. That is kind of how you win the game. You're all about finding the artifacts. Thankfully, most of the artifacts are on the mountain chain here, so you can just kind of keep expanding northward. The downside is if you expand anywhere outside of the mountains, or even if you don't, people will keep attacking you from all directions. Hilariously, the faction that kind of likes you the most in the area after a few turns is going to be Manfred, the vampire count. You can get a non-aggression pact with him, in my experience, in like the first 10 turns. And hopefully he doesn't attack you. You do want to fortify Karak with a garrison building once you can. Technically, you could destroy your barracks here. I don't recommend it because you need the dwarf warriors early on. And you want to fortify this because with a gold mine and it being your capital, it's extraordinarily valuable to you. Plus, it has a unique building, which is the ancestral birth rate base of Karak, which boosts, as you can see, a lot of stuff, including the fact that it allows you to levy more troops in your starting province. This guy, it's rough, though. I'm not going to kid. Once you expand up to here, in my 3 runs with this guy, you will get attacked by Skarbrand, who's located here. You might get attacked by Manfred. You will get attacked if you expand up north at all. Quick Headtaker will come from you. Greenskins will be attacking you. Don't venture outside the mountains. It is extraordinarily tempting to go take Skarbrand's capital up here, and you can do it by the time you get up there. If you do, raise it. Don't occupy it. If you occupy it, you will be facing invasions like crazy. Especially if you rush it, because if you haven't rushed it, you will not have killed off the Skaven and other factions over here. And yes, you have a mission to get up here and take this province out here and this one out here. I recommend waiting on those. Focus on getting a country going. Take this, fortify it. Fortify your capital. Fortify the other settlements over here. Build up to 2 provinces that are good, that can support 2 armies. Then think about expanding outward. The longer you wait to expand, the less factions you'll have to fight because they kill each other off like really fast in this area. I have yet to find someone you can ally. There are no dwarves around. The elves that are around don't love you. The lizardmen don't even like you particularly that much either. He wants to focus on different trees. Dwarven diplomats here are less than useful for this guy because everyone close to you hates you. If you can expand enough, you'll meet some lizardmen that might not hate you, and maybe you'll find some high elves or humans. But by and large, you are a sole dwarf faction whose job is to conquer it all. If you expand north, you'll eventually meet the other dwarves, but you have to go through Queek, you have to go through Skarbrand, you have to go through multiple factions before you can actually get up there. It's rough. In terms of an actual lord, Thorg Ironbrow is, I want to say, disappointing. He is a runesmith, which isn't bad. Problem is, you start with a runesmith hero who you should focus into runes. But then you also could focus into runes with Thorg Ironbrow. The problem is the runes stack. Like, you can only use one rune before it's locked for a while. It's not worth going down it for him, in my opinion. Keep a runic lord in your army, and you've pretty much got the benefits of him while saving the points. Focus on the blue line so you get the replenishment, obviously, Inquiring Mind. Then it's really up to you. You could go down the runes. I recommend you probably go down his personal tree here, which gives him some access to stronger runes and decreases cooldowns, makes your runesmiths stronger, allows you to build up more. This guy's a slower faction than the other dwarves, who are already really slow. It's all about the runes. The cool thing is he gets this rune of Seeking, which allows anti-large projectiles to home in on targets. You put on your Grudge Thrower, it becomes amazingly more accurate. You get the rune of Burning on your Bolt Thrower, they get even stronger. You boost your core rollers, missile damage, and finally up here, you put your army to more damage and frenzy. It is worth going up here to Anvil of Doom and getting the shared cooldown on runes, because then it allows you to cast more rune spells, which is your only way to get magic as the dwarves, and boost it even further. I wouldn't go down runes with him. He doesn't have anything to boost his combat stats. He's not a really great fighter. Focus on the blue line, and probably, once you get this line, red line to boost what troops you have. And honestly, your whole thing is getting these books and then reforging them. Not books, items, and then reforging them. Once you do, you get all these things, which are really powerful, which will boost you even further. So my logic is, he has a relatively poor start. He's a poor lord, but if he survives, he gets insane runes, and at some point, he just starts playing like all the other dwarves. It's important to note out that you start out with 8 grudges, and these will build up, so you will very quickly have a lot of grudge problems. You'll get more slayers. He has no bonuses to slayers, so it doesn't help you much. It's very rough. I enjoyed it. Like, it's fun feeling like I'm reclaiming the Dwarven Empire single-handedly with no allies and everybody hates me. But it does get tiring getting attacked, and everybody's going to declare war on you, basically. Even Orion went after me. Manfred was the only one who didn't, but I think that was just a matter of time. But anyway, that's Thorg Ironbrow's start. Off to the hardest of the dwarf starts. Okay, here we are with the last of the dwarf lords. We've saved the best and the hardest for last. We have Belegar Ironhammer. Now you'll note we started several turns into this game, mainly because I wanted to show you how it works. We're turn 5, and we own 5 settlements. This is important because this guy is all about the quest for Karak 8 Peaks. Until you control Karak 8 Peaks, all your settlements are, all your upkeep of unit is 50% more expensive, and you've got a grudge that will build up over time. Get worse, and it will get worse, and it will get worse. Your mission, should you choose to accept it or not, is to get over here and retake Karak 8. It is clearly a distance away. It is hard to do so. There's 2 other factions, Skarsnik and Weak, who are both headed that way as well. It is not as hard, I think, as it was in Total Warhammer 2, but your start is a lot worse. At the start, you own Zarek Zil, probably. And it's not a great settlement. It's a minor one. I recommend throwing a garrison in it because being a dwarf, if you lose a settlement, you get a grudge. You don't want to have that happen. You want to expand up, take Karak Ufdar. And once you do, and this is strange, you will get, at least I got in my 2 test runs, a event that allowed me to confederate Karak him. Take it. You can refuse to. I recommend taking it. First off, it gives you another province. Which, first off, you can't defend because you're broke. But most importantly, it gives you another army. So Belegar does not have an immense army at the start, but Karak Hearn tends to have a grudge thrower. and a handful of other units. So what you want to do is usually about turn 4, or in fact on turn 4, you want to march Belegar up to around here. You want to take your Karak army underway, travel it to here, merge them together, and use the Grudge Thrower to allow you to attack Karak Izor immediately. You need to get to Karak Izor fast. In fact, it's less of a race for Karak 8 Peaks, and for this guy, it's more of a race to Karak Izor. The time I didn't manage to take Karak Izor quickly, I never could muster a large enough army to take it against the faction you start at war with, the Greenskin. The reason you want it is it has a unique building. It gives you 500 gold. This guy is the poorest of the dwarves. This helps a lot. Once you get this, you then have to think about where you're going. You want to try and get non-aggression pacts with Talea, the southern border princes, and ideally, if you can, with Wood Elves. And, of course, with Balthazar Gelt and the rest of the Empire. You don't want anyone around you to want to kill you. Now, obviously, there is the Skavens and Skaven Blight will probably come after you, and it's a pain. And you might have greenskins that survive and come after you as well. You have some dwarves nearby, Carignorn up here, which could theoretically confederate, and you'll start bordering other dwarves. Once you have this, though, I recommend pretty much starting a sprint towards Karak 8 Peaks. Once you've got at least it stable, build it to next level, get the copper mine going, get a gate built up. You'll have to wait till level 3 on that. Then you've got a good enough income you can afford to move your army out. You're still not going to really be able to afford a second army. You might be able to afford a lord in 1 or 2 units. Karak up here, you want to immediately stick on Venerate the Ancestors in hopes of preventing a revolt. And you pretty much just hope no one invades you up here because you won't have an army to defend it. Same thing with down south. What then you want to do as Belegar is you have a choice, honestly. You could keep expanding here, but you're suffering a massive penalty in both a grudge and a 50% upkeep. So I really do recommend you go for Karak 8 Peak. I recommend you take Belegar and you just hop up into Karak, run across to Migdal von Barak, and then jump across. The other option is if you can get military access through the border princes, which I did, you can just jump down here and you can just sprint across. Over here, hopefully Barak Var is still alive. If they are, you can get even closer. I don't necessarily recommend going straight for Karak 8 Peaks. You can try to. I recommend trying to snag the Black Crag up here, which is owned by Skaven. And that will give you a good base to keep invading if for some reason you lose your main army. Now, Belegar, once you do, gets access to, first off, the penalty goes away. He completes a grudge. There's unique buildings. There's a bonus. It's really powerful if you succeed. Personally, though, his faction, if you can take Karak 8 Peaks, becomes the strongest of the dwarves. If you don't, it's probably the weakest. You get a bonus when you lay siege. You have a unique building chain, which is worth getting. But you start with 4 Clan Angron Ancestor heroes. These are the best heroes in the game, bar none. They are Ethereal, Thanes, Master Engineers, and a Runesmith. They have extremely high physical resistance, which is great when fighting Greenskin. Kind of sucks when you fight magic units because they die. They are immortal, so they will respawn if they're killed. They have no upkeep. Enemy heroes cannot do anything to them, and they will not run away. When killed in action, they'll just get wounded and come back in a turn or 2. This basically means you have 5 immortal units here for the rest of the game. And you kind of want to keep them all together. You could theoretically send some of them out to like raid and do damage and stuff. I tend to leave them all together. You could send this guy out stealing tech if you wanted to, because he's got a good chance of succeeding. But you want to boost it all. You want to keep these guys alive. You want to level them up. I recommend turning your Thanes into melee ones. Recommend getting magic on the Runesmith. For the engineer, I recommend trying to boost the range, your range units you have, because you're going to want to use range units, so you have to use less dwarves and lose less dwarves. Belegar himself is an interesting lord. He has King of 8 Peaks, which allows him to siege attack without siege weapons, meaning you don't need grudge throwers, although you probably want them. He also gets a bonus when fighting greenskin, orcs, and skaven, and he can vanguard his units during underway battles if he gets intercepted or intercepts people. He also has the ability Mighty Stone Oath, which basically affect allies and make them even more defensive. Personally, he's a half decent fighter. He's above average. He's not unbelievable. He has the normal dwarf blue trait that you want to get inspirational leader on. He's probably one of the few that I might get Wallmaster on to start so that you have to fight less battles and you can siege them down more. Snag Lord of the Deeps because you'll be fighting subterranean battles a fair amount of the time. Obstinacy so that your army tires less. If you can get Rally the Holds, which helps reducing global recruitment so that as you expand towards Karak 8 Peaks, you can recruit from your buildings back in your homeland. Gather the Old Clans increases recruit rank, allows you to recruit more local dwarves. Reclamation, plus leadership, plus charge. More Oath Gold, Tunnel Warfare is great because if you have miners with blasting charges, this gives them extra ammunition and just in general makes your miners, rangers, and bolt throwers better. Ancestral Guidance, you get Thanes. More importantly, physical resistance plus 10 in your whole army. Finally, Age of Reconquest, you move further. Faction-wide, things are cheaper to construct, and you do damage to the enemy. You lower their leadership when you're fighting them. Siege battles. And of course, you get Bane of Destruction, which boosts your entire army for Skaven and Skin. Great. You have to get to level 12. You'll get there rather fast. After that, I wouldn't recommend boosting his melee skill. I'd recommend doing the red line so that you strengthen your army. And once you get Karak 8 Peaks, the world is your oyster. I recommend, though, that you expand around Karak 8 Peaks and do that. Ideally, you don't want to lose this area. But if you do, it's not the end of the world. Your long-term goals, destroy Crooked Moon mutinous Gits who own Karak 8 Peaks. Crooked Moon, Skarsnik's up here. Clan Wars with Queek is down south. You've got to kill them. And in general, you have to occupy, loot, raise, or sack 30 settlements for short victory. You'll get it if you take this area. Have fun. That is the Dwarves fully explained. Sorry it is so long. If you did enjoy this and you listen this far, please do like. Subscribe if you want more. Join my Discord if you want to chat. And I hope to see you in this or in one of my other guide or Let's Plays. Bye for now.